What's up, guys? My name is Khan and we're back today in Scrap Mechanic, and we're back with another awesome creation that's just sort of ridiculous, but it was a great suggestion in the hovering crate video. And after doing that video, a lot of you guys suggested, and you said, hey Khan, well, if you have a crate that can adjust its weight automatically, couldn't you make a device that can actually weigh stuff instead? And lo and behold, I decided to take that advice and make this awesome truck scale here. But before we look at that, I just want to look at one very important thing that kind of makes all this possible, which is what weight in Scrap Mechanic actually is. So obviously we could configure this to any sort of number system that we want. We could configure it to show us just really any number, because all this scale is doing is measuring how much pushes down on it, how much force pushes on it. But in reality, I decided to try and calibrate it with the XO meter from the mod pack. So the XO meter in the mod pack outputs mass now, which actually just calculates the mass based on the total volume of the block and what kind of blocks there are. There's a whole density formula for it. But regardless, we can actually hook it up into a bunch of number blocks. And you can see this giant brick of metal, wood, and concrete actually weighs 212,483 units, whatever those units are. So I decided to try and calibrate the scale to work with that sort of system. So without further ado, we'll just drive the truck on it, show you guys a little bit about how it all works first, and then we'll take a look at sort of the math behind it, and then why the calibration is a little bit difficult to do in Scrap Mechanic. So I've been having a few different issues with the calibration, and maybe you guys have some suggestions on how to fix the calibration, how to improve the accuracy of the scale, because lo and behold, it's not as accurate as that mass calculating scripting block is. Really simply, these are just two ramps on free floating bearings. They're relatively gradual, just so a truck with a trailer can drive up onto the scale. And then the scale itself is actually supported in sort of a chamber there with some pistons. So we've got 6 pistons hooked into this fancy stepper motor. And then we've got, of course, these 4 sensors from the mod pack, which output a number. So this does use the mod pack number logic, but really simply, we're measuring the distance on each of these 4 sensors to the bottom of this plate, and we're powering the pistons with a constant force. So the pistons are automatically extending to 1 block above their height with a lot of force to lift up. Well, they can lift that whole block. I believe the max capacity of this is about 1 million units, whatever 1 million units is. So really, really huge capacity. I've never actually gotten to max capacity. I haven't tested that yet. But regardless, they lift a lot of power, and they do that with this stepper motor. So the stepper motor allows you to sort of put custom controller stuff into either a bearing or a piston. And really simply, it allows you to create a custom power, custom speed, and a custom distance. Of course, only up to the 15 blocks on the regular piston, but the custom power and the custom speed really allows you to make it super, super powerful. So these blocks actually have 5 million power, these pistons, which allows them to lift a heck of a lot. But they're, of course, only going up to 1 block in height, and they're locked into place in these grooves. So really simply, we drive our vehicle onto this, the whole plate will go down, and lo and behold, we'll be able to measure what it is. So first we have to zero it, so we click that 0 button, and then we can click weigh to make sure that our platform shows all 0 weight, which it does. So once we've zeroed out the scale, we can grab our truck here, which you can see is attached to the trailer. So it has a combined weight of 44,240. Now, like I said before, the scale does use a function to determine how much distance compressed equals how much mass. So it is doing math to actually figure that one out. I know everybody on this channel just absolutely loves math, but we are in fact doing math. And I spent a fair amount of time just measuring different weights and trying to figure out what a good trend line would be. And we'll talk a little bit later about how that works and why there's some issues with it. But regardless, we park our truck on here, make sure all our axles are on top of the scale, which are these front ones on? Yeah, they are. Okay, they're good. So we should be able to just get back up here. Now, our scale is welded to the ground. The whole thing, it does have to be welded to the ground. Otherwise, it'll just kind of bounce all over the place. It's a bad idea. So we'll just, we'll hit the weigh button. And we got 46,286 compared to 44,240. So a little bit light. Now, of course, we can hit the weigh button multiple times, and you'll see the weight will change a little bit. And this is because the pistons are getting pushed down constantly by the, by the creation, this weight itself. But then they're also constantly trying to push back up. You can actually see straight through this sort of glass here. We've got the 4 piston measurements, and in the front we've got 0.9 and 0.9, and in the back we've got 1.043 and 1.044. So they average out to 0.972, which then of course gets worked into the mathematical equation. So we can actually, slightly shift this, and we might get a little bit different of a weight. But if not, we can always adjust the scale and calibrate it for the weight of this truck. But that calibration won't necessarily stay for everything. So here we go. We'll just weigh that. So you can see just by shifting it, we get a different average on the pistons. So the pistons themselves are kind of adjusting the platform differently. The sensors give us a little bit different average. So there's only so much you can do with the consistency of scrap mechanic physics. Obviously in scrap mechanic we have rigid bodies, but you know that we get shifting sometimes on bearings and on pistons. So there is the stiffness adjustment on these pistons as well. They're at 1,000 stiffness, but even then we still get some variances, you can see. So now we're actually showing a little bit below the weight, 4,300 instead of 4,200, rather than a little bit above. But the nice thing about this is if you do load it into a world, you set up your settings for the piston, and as long as you don't change them, you can actually have, you know, relatively consistent things. And you can have a lot of fun, you know, if we actually load up this trailer, for example, with just some cement blocks, we can actually see the weight change. So let's just put, you know, some cement blocks there. They don't have to be attached. They can be free floating. And if we weigh that, now you can see it's gone up by about 4,000 pounds. We can bring it up even higher. And of course, this way you could actually measure loads. Now, of course, it's not going to be as accurate as the scripted mass block, like I said. And if you guys do have some suggestions in the comments down below on how you think we can make this more accurate, let me know. You can see we're still going up in weight. Really, really cool stuff. I don't even think this is going to fit on the trailer, but does it? Oh boy, oh boy, that is too much for this truck. Yeah, this truck is not, it's not driving anytime soon. But what kind of weight do we got on this now if we weigh this? Yeah, we're 287,000 pounds. So, you know, really, really cool stuff. And it's not terribly accurate, 256. We can also recalibrate it. So I'll explain a little bit about how the math works and how the calibration works, just so you guys can understand why this whole thing is the way it is. So we'll just leave that sort of over there. And in fact, we can even check out what the weight of the Humvee is first. So let's just click weigh here. You can see we're still zeroed, which is good. -0, +0, it doesn't really matter. So there's a bunch of decimals that are in behind that number, but I mean, we don't really care. I mean, it's not really, you know, 100% accurate anyways, but here we go. So this is a Humvee, 10,500 units of weight is the total weight on this thing. And let's just put it on the truck scale and see. Now, generally speaking, if you calibrate the scale for heavier objects, it starts to lose calibration when it gets to lighter objects, and vice versa. If you calibrate it for really light objects, it'll lose calibration when it gets to heavier objects. And really simply, I think it has to do with the inconsistency of physics in scrap mechanic. But let's see here. Yeah, see, this one's showing a little light, so 9,987, so it's about 500 light. So we could adjust this function if we wanted to fix it to make it work closer for those kind of vehicles, but overall it will offer a direct comparison between two vehicles if you have the same setup. So really simply how it works is we average out the sensor inputs, like I said before, and then we just feed them into this one function. Now, I did take a ton of data points. I took about 40 different measurements on various weights, and I tried to just figure out with the calibration of the pistons what was a good sort of trend. So I took all these measurements and I plugged them into a spreadsheet, and then I actually charted them in the spreadsheet and used a line of best fit to figure out what they were, and I played around with different functions. Now, I was hoping that they would be linear, because if you look at how a spring works in real life, a spring follows Hooke's law, which is just -k times x, which is just basically a straight equation. Long story short, it's a straight line. So the more you push in a spring, the more force it takes, and the less you push in a spring, the less force it takes, in a very, very straight pattern. You only need to multiply it by one number to get the exact value. But unfortunately in scrap mechanic, the suspension has a little bit of a dampening effect, and even with the pistons and the way gravity is calculated, we seem to have a little bit more of a dampening effect. So I found that it's better to use a quadratic equation, which makes sort of like a curved graph, and even then you kind of have to play around with the numbers. So really simply, we take the average measurement, 1.004, and we subtract it from the 0 position, which gives us our number. So if we zero it and we weigh it, we get 0, because this platform has some default weight, which pushes down on the pistons a default amount. So by zeroing it, you're getting rid of that default weight. So you press 0, it says, okay, this is my initial measurement of the pistons. Everything else is subtracted from that. And that's what this big long number string is here in the middle. That's the difference between the pistons, where they were and where they are now. So if we take a big brick of metal here and we put this along like so, this should be enough metal. And then we re-click the weigh button. You can see it actually gives us a difference of 0.0061761. So a very, very, very small measurement on the piston. Then we take that number and we square it. So that's what this top line is. And then we multiply it by 1.8 million. And then we add it to 1.35 million times that number. So this creates our awesome curved quadratic function. I know all you guys are like, whoa, high school quadratic math, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now, of course, you can adjust these two values again to calibrate the scale. So we've got our color wheel here, and really simply we've got a button to calibrate the top and a button to calibrate the bottom. So let's say we want to use a linear function to measure it instead of a quadratic. We can actually just go here, paint this dark green, that'll get rid of the green variable, paint this blue, that'll get rid of that because it counts down. And then if we want to bring this back up, we can paint at the top, and there we go, back to 1.8, and we can paint this one again. Just like that. So you can calibrate this function however you want. And if you guys do download the scale from the workshop and you find a good calibration, let me know what it is. I've been playing around with so many different calibrations, and like I said, I've been playing around with spreadsheets and trying to find a consistency and a really good function that will kind of represent the weight. But no matter how hard I try, it always seems to give you some weird results. And again, I think it has a lot to do with, number one, the physics and scrap mechanic. Number two, the fact that the positioning of this block makes a difference with how it's sort of measured because it's all being averaged. And then, of course, number three, the consistency of scrap mechanic yet again. So I'm really excited with it, though. I think it's a really cool piece if you have any sort of like town or any kind of, realism type thing you'd want to do. Anything that involves, sort of role playing, I guess, would be really cool, because now you can actually, weigh your trucks and you can have different load restrictions and stuff. Obviously, there's no, real difference with having load restrictions or not, but I guess you could figure out the max weight capacity of your trucks. And it is a very large platform if you do have various sizes of transport trucks. So, we can just take our low boy over here. And in fact, let's load the Humvee up onto this, and then we'll drive both of them together up onto the scale. Now, I'm not going to upload the trucks here to the workshop or anything like that. I will upload the scale, though, of course. It does use just the mod pack for that number logic, and I think it's a pretty cool creation. It works pretty well. This is great. Normally, you disconnect the front piece from the... There we go. Look at that. Amazing. Now, like I said before, it's obviously much more accurate to just put the mass calculating block on top of each of your creations and just, sort of add up the weights. But, I mean, I think this is just a lot more fun and a lot more realistic, and a little bit of lag there. Not too bad. I really should just weld the stuff down. If you have it welded to the transport truck, like the transport truck is its own creation, it really doesn't lag at all. But you just got to drive nice and slow. Here we go. We should be pretty much parked up there. I didn't check if it was zeroed before, but you know what? Good enough. And we should be like, what, 54,000 pounds-ish? So if you click the weigh button, you know what? 53,405. So it's not too bad. It's pretty close. But like I said, I've calibrated this closer to the 50,000 pound range. If you want it to be calibrated more for light vehicles, you got to adjust this function to work better for light vehicles. And then again, if you want to calibrate it for heavy vehicles, you got to do the same thing. I encourage you guys, though, download it from the workshop, put it on one of your worlds. Make sure, of course, you do weld this to the ground first. If you don't, you'll get some really weird measurements. They'll kind of bounce all over the place. But overall, I think it's a pretty cool creation, and I'd love to hear your guys' suggestions on other cool creations that we can build. This one came directly from the comments after the cargo pod, and that was, of course, why don't you make something that can actually sense the weight of a creation? And rather than use thrusters and kind of increase the thrust, I decided to do it a little differently, and I wanted to try and make it a little bit more like the truck weighing scales, where the big trucks drive onto them, push them down, and then, of course, they use a little bit different of a sensor. But either way, it was a very similar concept, and I'm really excited to have done it. So, of course, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.